Something that's been on my mind lately is mistakes, specifically making mistakes and the whole process of it. So, what I wanted to talk about today is, I guess, about making mistakes. First of all, um, not avoiding mistakes, which I think is probably the more common thing. Um, for me, this comes across a lot in perfectionistic tendencies. I think it's quite common in how society in general tends to kind of encourage people to behave, to kind of treat mistakes as something bad, something to be avoided, something to be, I guess, eliminated altogether if it's even possible. I don't know whether it is. No, actually, in fact, I don't think it is. So that's one, avoiding mistakes, probably the most common one. The second one is kind of like allowing for mistakes, I guess, which is kind of going too far off of the other side. Let me rephrase that in a better way. I think going too far off the other side would be kind of just allowing mistakes without intending to correct them. Just kind of like, yeah, it's a mistake, it's fine, whatever. And then not changing anything, which I don't think is a great attitude to take towards mistakes in general. And I think what I want to talk about is kind of the third option, which, hello, after so long, I'm finally doing option C. Like the format of not A, not B, and option C again. But I think the third format is the one that I've been kind of mulling over, which is that I think mistakes are something that teaches us something. Probably can't be really fully avoided, but at the same time, I don't think it's something that we should just let it happen, because I think it happens to teach us something. And we do need to take a bit of time to kind of learn from that mistake, right? Like, a mistake is kind of a signal to be like, hey, this is something that can be done better. And it's normal that it happens, but at the same time, it's something that I want to move on from. Not bypass, but actually learn from and then move on from. So, let me clarify what I mean by this. The idea kind of comes about from watching, I don't remember the guy's name, but this guy talking about traditional art and how a lot of young artists, because he's an older artist, he was saying how a lot of young artists are afraid of making mistakes, particularly in traditional art media, because I think there is that tendency that when you do digital art, you have Control Z, which is undo, right? So that is a very comforting tool to have, to be able to be like, anything that I do that I don't like, I can undo up to a certain point. But it's a bit harder to do that in traditional media, traditional art medium, whether it's painting, sculpture, pottery, whatever it is. It's a bit more difficult because it's in real life, right? And what he was advocating for in that video is kind of like for traditional artists to find a way to create that space for yourself such that you do have some extent of Control Z in your traditional art medium. And in the case where that's not possible, because, sometimes that isn't possible, to then know how to kind of either minimize the thing that you don't think should have been done, which is a mistake, and then how you can move on from there to kind of maybe hide, embellish, or even showcase that mistake. And I think this thinking is something that is very insightful to me, in the sense that, like, I have been someone who is so much of a perfectionist that I think when I was 17 or 18 and one of my classmates told me, I think you're a perfectionist, and my reply to her was, oh, I've never considered myself a perfectionist because I'm not good enough to be one. And she looked at me and she was like, that is the sign that you are a perfectionist. And that's kind of stuck with me since, because I was so much of a perfectionist that I couldn't even consider myself anywhere near good enough to think of myself as a perfectionist, unlike some of my other classmates who were quite aware that they were perfectionists. So I think my strategy has always been to like try to avoid mistakes altogether, which is not a very feasible strategy in real life. I mean, like, mistakes are things that happen. But I think going too far off the other end to be like mistakes are fine, all mistakes are fine, they don't need to be corrected, is also kind of like not helpful. So I like this traditional art medium like method of looking at mistakes, in the sense of like, yes, you're a beginner artist, yes, you're probably gonna make mistakes. I think the thing isn't to avoid mistakes altogether, but figure out for yourself or take from other people their methods, a way to give yourself space to make the mistakes that will inevitably come up, and know how you can adjust from there to kind of like lessen the impact of the mistake, and also to kind of learn from it. And it sounds maybe a bit abstract, so like I'm going to talk about how I have personally understood it, which is through, I think, doll face-ups. So again, I have another channel. It's a ball jointed doll hobby channel, and I've been wanting to make a video talking about how to do Ctrl Z or undo in real life with doll face-ups. I have not made that video for various other reasons, like, yeah, anyway, I'm not going to get into it. But I do have the tips and tricks on like how to do it. I just don't know how to take video footage in a way that's comfortable for me. But the point is that I figured out ways to kind of save my work intermittently, so that I can then make mistakes that can be erased. So I will give you an example of what I mean by that. So the method that I do doll face-ups, which is not everybody's method, is that I will separate my pastels, which are the dry materials, and the watercolor paints, which are wet materials. So I will finish the pastel stuff, I would seal it with MSC, which is a sealant, and then after that, only after that sealant is on, I will go on with the watercolor paints. And the reason why I choose watercolor paints over things like acrylic paint is that watercolor paint, you can wipe it away with water, whereas acrylic you cannot. You need some sort of like brush cleaner, some sort of like stronger medium, for example thinner, to wipe it away, and thinner will erase whatever else is underneath, whereas water will not, because the sealant in general is strong enough that water will not erase things underneath if you seal everything well enough. So what I have found works for me is that I'm not so certain of my paint strokes on a doll face-up with watercolor paints, like compared to my confidence level with pastels. So what I do is that I will seal all the dry layers or the pastels, and then that kind of gives me a safe point, like in a video game or something, from which I would then do my watercolor line work. Right, so I will draw, and then if I'm not happy, I have my tissue with water nearby, and then I can quickly just like wipe things off, and then take another piece of dry tissue, wipe it off so that it's dry, so that I can continue painting again. And that to me is what I mean by trying to accommodate mistakes. Not trying to avoid it altogether, but accepting the fact that I am, more likely to make mistakes doing the watercolor paint portion of the face-up, and being like, okay, if it's gonna happen, what can I do to kind of allow myself that space to make that mistake, but kind of give it a boundary as well, so that I am safe to make mistakes within that zone, but the consequences are not dire. I mean, granted, it's a face-up. If it doesn't work, I can just redo it, but when you have hours of work underneath it that you kind of have to erase the whole thing off because you made one mistake at a later stage, that's kind of, it's not life or death dire, but it's kind of dire in the context of things, if that makes sense. So so that's in art, I guess. And I think what I've been trying to figure out lately is how does this apply in my regular day-to-day life. And what I've realized is kind of that real life isn't very, I mean, at least the place, the situation, the culture that I'm in general, whatever the case is not by default very forgiving of mistakes, nor does it really by default have a space that is encouraging of mistakes and of learning from mistakes. So I guess in the same way I've had to figure out like, oh, let me seal certain layers of my face up work first so that I can have a safe space to kind of make mistakes and then correct my mistakes without needing to redo all of my work. I probably need something like that for my real life as well. And that's kind of vague, and that's kind of, I don't have a final answer at the moment. But that's kind of what I've been trying to figure out recently. How to create a life in which mistakes are not something to be avoided, not something that I just kind of like, haha, it's fine, when it's not. But also not to make a big deal out of it, but just allowing the mistakes to be, being able to learn from it, and also at the same time creating kind of a boundary or a safe space in which I can let myself make mistakes without it becoming a huge deal. I think that's something that I really want for myself in my life. I don't know what's the answer yet. If you have any thoughts, share them below. I mean, I only have the one in the traditional art media, but it's definitely something that I will still be thinking about. So I think today's video went a bit all over the place. It's a bit too bright right now, that's why I keep closing my eyes. It's like midday in Singapore. It's cloudy, but the sun is still really bright. So anyway, thank you for listening to today's video. It's been more than a month since I filmed last, so I feel a bit awkward. But thank you for listening, and I'll see you next time. Bye.